Good day and welcome to today's Conversation podcast. Today I'm privileged to host a renowned tax personality in our country. I think has been at the heart of collecting domestic revenue for us. In 2016, Dr. Kinsley Chanda was appointed as Commissioner General at the Zambia Revenue Authority. This was at a time when he had 21 years cumulative work and experience at senior management level at government, international and private organization. Kinsley has a master's degree in business administration. He also has a degree in agricultural economics, and then he has various specialized certificates in management and taxation. He's also a proven businessman, entrepreneur, and he has very reliable and analytical skills. His major accomplishments, other than being Director General of the Zambia, Commissioner General of the Zambia Revenue Authority, is that he's worked in various countries, advising governments. He's worked at the National Treasury in South Africa, the Ministry of Finance equivalent in South Africa. He's worked as an advisor to the Director General for the European Union Capacity Building Project. That saw him literally advise SADC countries. Let me not blow his trumpet. The man is here himself. Kinsley Chanda, welcome to today's conversation.
Thank you, Ambassador, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. A lot of people know you as Commissioner General or former Commissioner General of the Zambia Revenue Authority. Just who is Kinsley Chanda?
Kinsley Chanda is a child who was born on 26th of June, 1969, in Chinsali, in a village called Kawangwe. I grew up in that setup until I was able to go to secondary school in Isoka, at Isoka Secondary School. That time it was Isoka Boys. After that, of course, I went to University of Zambia, where I studied agriculture economics. And after graduating from the University of Zambia with a merit degree, I was actually the best graduating student that time.
Wow!
Yeah,
congratulations.
I joined a company, an international company called SGS. SGS was a pre-shipment inspection company. At that point, I started departing from my agriculture training to customs initially.
Yeah.
And as you'll see later, I branched off completely into taxation. After working for SGS for 7 years, I actually worked with Honorable Gary Nkombo.
Yes, yeah. He was at SGS too.
Yes, he was my boss.
Okay.
He actually employed me into that organization. So after...
Just speak briefly about SGS. Having worked in the bank, I knew how important SGS was, especially to protect importers.
Yes.
Because you are the one that do whatever, whoever an importer is buying, you're the one that do the pre-shipment inspection.
Yes, exactly.
In those countries to ensure that what has been paid for is what gets delivered.
Yes. SGS was assuring government of quality as well as the value of the goods. It was a pre-shipment inspection contract that was signed between SGS International and the Zambian government then. I was lucky immediately I graduated. I was made manager of a unit that was supporting ZRA directly. That time, yes. This is when ZRA was just formed.
Was being transformed from being a customs department under Ministry of Finance now to an autonomous agency.
Exactly. So they needed a lot of support in terms of customs valuation and the classification of goods. And that is where SGS was coming in, because we were undergoing very vigorous training in those areas. And the SGS saw that as an opportunity. As ZRA was being formed, the organization needed that support. So I was the project manager for that. And through that process, I was interacting a lot with the ZRA officials. That time, as you may remember, we had expatriates running ZRA. We had people from the UK, from New Zealand, from Australia, just to name a few countries. So I was interacting a lot with them, and they realized that I was more valuable with ZRA than the consulting company. So, you know, I resigned from SGS in 1997. And I was given a very good position in ZRA.
As the issue of pre-shipment inspection, because at the time I think SGS was only the sole operator in Zambia doing pre-shipment inspection. Has that area been liberalized? Do we have other companies, or it's still the same way government at every 10 signs with a particular pre-shipment inspection agency?
Ambassador, like everything else that has been affected by globalization, many African countries, Zambia inclusive, realized that there was no need for pre-shipment inspection.
There was no need?
There was no need, because you could find prices of these items on the internet. You can, you know, the World Customs Organization also developed the customs to customs support. So you find that if something is coming out of China, Zambian customs authorities can request information from the Chinese customs authorities.
Without going through an agency?
Exactly. So that contract was actually cancelled. And a lot of pre-shipment inspection companies actually lost business, and they decided to go into other areas. Yeah, so it's no longer there.
Thanks for that clarification.
So in ZRA, I joined customs as an acting assistant commissioner, responsible for technical, because the idea then was to modernize customs and ensure that customs was operating using, you know, modern standards. So we went there as a team. I was not the only one that was poached from SGS. There were several other people. So we joined ZRA, and we were put in a unit called technical services. So we started the computerization of customs. I headed the development of valuation database for customs and many other modern...
When you say customs, you're speaking to the general audience. What does that mean?
Customs is a division within the Zambia Revenue Authority. The Zambia Revenue Authority, at least at the time I left, I don't know how the structure is now, had the three major operating divisions. We have the direct taxes, which is the division responsible for pay-as-you-earn, company income tax, and other direct taxes. Then we had the VAT division that was responsible for collection of VAT and excise duty. Then we had customs. Customs is the division that is responsible for border management and collection of taxes on Zambian imports and controlling of imports and exports. So from there, things moved very fast. I was appointed as assistant commissioner for initially Lusaka International Airport. Then I was moved to Lusaka Port. Then I was transferred to Chirundu. I managed Chirundu, you know, in very harsh conditions. That modernization had not even happened yet.
Before we had that one-stop border post.
Yes. It was really like a bush, but a very, very busy border. I was taken to Ndola. From Ndola, again, I was brought back to Lusaka. And I was actually on a management training program. Because immediately after managing all these ports, I was appointed as deputy commissioner responsible for operations in customs. So I worked there for 4 years before I was appointed as commissioner customs. I was commissioner customs until... That
was a rapid rise.
Yes, it was. I was commissioner customs until 2006 when I was fired. Okay, it was just after elections, and of course, you know, certain issues came up. There were accusations of supporting the opposition and that kind of thing.
They accused you of supporting the opposition,
which was PF then.
Yes.
So I was fired on that basis, and of course, it surprised me because by that time I had very small children. I think my oldest child was I think 10 years old. Yeah, the other one was 8. The other one was 1 year.
Were you a competent director of of customs?
Well, let people say, because at the time I was managing customs. Facts are there. It was the only performing division in ZRA. It was the only one. And unfortunately, I was replaced by somebody who was managing another division, which had absolutely nothing to do with customs. But you see, these are high-level decisions that are made for whatever reasons, whether it's for political reasons, economic reasons, or whatever. You know, at that point, it's a government job. It's not your company. You have to move on. So,
what did you do? You are rising, you are young, and you are a director of customs.
Yeah.
Then you hear these announcements from State House and Ministry of Finance that you've been fired. What did you do after that?
Well, absolutely nothing. I decided not to appeal. I decided not to complain. What I did instead was to form a tax consulting company.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is where my major departure now came in, because instead of now just focusing on customs, I started pushing myself to learn taxation, which is learning other taxes like VAT and direct taxes. So I formed a company that was responsible for providing tax advice to clients, both local and foreign investors. And when I got some big contracts, we started some mines. We also supported other mines that we are developing, which were already existing. So we started participating very heavily in the mining industry. And that is how people sometimes tend to wonder how much I understand mining
about
taxation.
mining.
Because I was on the other side as their consultant.
As a consultant.
Yes, I was a consultant for the mining industry. So at that point, there was also a push, because there were a lot of projects happening in Zambia. There was a push for me to go into clearing and forwarding services. So I formed a clearing company to complement our taxation.
So clearing and forwarding, speak to that. What is that?
That is where you operate as an agent representing the interests of importers and exporters at the borders.
Okay.
Yeah, so if they are buying goods from the UK, the documentation comes to you as an agent that these goods will arrive at such and such a border or such an airport, where of course you must be stationed and you must have the infrastructure to deal with that cargo and also do the paperwork with customs. So I started that business, which gave me something very, very big. At that point, I got a contract with the European Union to support the formation of the Zambia Development Agency.
Oh,
yes.
Oh, speak to that briefly.
Yes, I was the TA, technical assistant, and an EU-sponsored project, which was capacity building.
Because we had various agencies doing almost the same work. ZPA, I think they were all then groups together under ZDA. Which were the organizations you would remember?
There was what was being called Investment Center.
Yes, Investment Center.
There was Investment Center.
Zambia Privatization Agency.
Yeah,
I think there were three or four.
Yes, there were several. So I was on the Investment Center side to promote. My title was Investment Promotion Advisor to the newly formed ZDA.
Okay.
So we started by forming it, and of course we developed the first strategic plan for ZDA, which was a very good experience for me. And I worked for the EU for 3 years, and from there I went.
Or you were an expert attached to ZDA, but paid by the European Union?
Yes, I was paid by the European Union. Then just before that contract expired, I was hired by COMESA to establish the first ever one-stop border post in Africa, the Churundu one-stop border post.
That's the first one-stop border post?
That was the very first one-stop border post in Africa, yes. Okay. Sponsored by DFID and JICA. So it was in two portions. There was the physical infrastructure side, which JICA was dealing with, the bridge and offices. And then there was the soft side, which DFID was dealing with, the procedures, the equipment, the training, and so on. I was the project manager for that. And we did that very successfully, launched it. It was a very big launch. We had a lot of African governments coming to see what we had done, their delegations. And I remember at one point I hosted members of parliament for the British Parliament.
Wow.
Yeah, that came to see, how their money was spent. And
Why was it important to set up a one-stop border post?
Trade facilitation. You see, trade delays at the borders increase costs of doing business. Trade delays also breeds corruption at the borders. And of course, just negates the benefits from trade. So the overriding objective was to ensure that there is quick facilitation of goods and people.
What I know, when I was
those
High Commissioner
borders,
in South Africa, the complaint I would receive were from these truckers that sending a truck to Zambia or to DRC, the turnaround sometimes goes up to 21 days.
That's true. That was
As
true.
a trucker, you want your truck back within 3 days. You want your truck back within 5 days. If a truck is taking 21 days, when will you make money? What causes that?
There are several factors. First and foremost, the outdated systems. Then the compliance requirements. You have to have this piece of paper. Means of for agricultural goods, for example, you need the paper from Mount Makuru. You need all sorts of permits and so on. So we had to cut down on that red tape. Then there were also delays related to corruption, where officers want to be paid. So they raise unnecessary queries. You know, maybe questioning the validity of certain documents or the price, questioning the price, alleging that it's undervalued. You know, all sorts of things could lead to that delay.
So how does a one-stop border post mitigate those factors?
Exactly. The first thing that it does is that you are stopped from presenting your documents to 2 different offices.
Zambia and Zambia.
Exactly. So you present through one window, and then at the back office, these officials share those documents and process them at once. Okay. I must confess, when we launched that project, it worked extremely well, very, very well. I remember presidents coming to open that. I think it was President Mwanawasa and President Mugabe. Yeah, it was wonderful. And also we had immigration was a real success, because immigration, you have 2 immigration officers sitting side by side. You give your passport to the exiting country. If you're coming out of Zimbabwe, you give to the Zimbabwean immigration official. He processes stamps, process on the system, gives to the next guy sitting to him, next to him.
For entry.
Yeah, for entry. So you exit and enter within the same building. So that was the concept, and it worked extremely well. Unfortunately, I've had some issues have cropped up where probably lack of trust, lack of cooperation.
We'll come to that.
Yeah.
So we are tracing your journey as a consultant, and you set up on behalf of COMESA, the one-stop border post.
Yes.
I think the major time Zambia see you is when there was an announcement by the new president, President Michael Sata, that he was setting you, he was appointing you as chair of a commission of inquiry to inquire, I think, into 3 borders. Was it Kasumbalesa and Nakonde? And there were issues around ZRM. Just speak to that. Yeah.
Actually, the time that I was receiving that appointment, I was sitting in Gaborone as an advisor to the SADC Secretariat.
Oh, now you had gone to advise SADC.
SADC, yes.
Yeah.
So I was living in Gaborone. I'd actually been relocated. Then I got a call that the president wanted to see me, and that there was an assignment, a national assignment for me. And I said, well, national duty, it doesn't matter. Whether you're enjoying whatever somewhere, if you can add value to your country, you must. So for me, it was...
Before we come to the Commission of Inquiry, just speak about your role at SADC. What was it?
SADC, I was employed to look at the compliance of SADC member states to the trade agreement, trade protocol, the SADC trade protocol. Yeah, you may recall that when SADC set up the SADC trade protocol in the year 2000, they had given their countries 10 years in which to reduce their tariffs to 0.
Yeah.
Okay? And everyone had to comply and ensure that at some point SADC reaches a free trade zone where there will be no trade tariffs. So my role there was to go and audit these countries, SADC member states. I think we were 4 of us. Yeah, and I was given specific countries. If I recall, I was given Tanzania, I was given Zambia, I was given Lesotho, Swaziland, Botswana itself. I had 6 countries. I've just forgotten the other one. I think Malawi. Yeah. I was given 6 countries to audit. basically to audit them and ensure that they are compliant to the SADC trade protocol. Yeah, it was a 1 year.
Have they been, was SADC at the time compliant?
No. They were not.
No one was willing to bring down.
I'm not sure they are even compliant now, because what happens is that a country would reduce their customs duty to 0, but introduce a surtax, which has equivalent effect. But just because surtax is not part of the protocol, countries thought that surtax is just a surcharge on goods. You say, okay, fine, if you are going to bring maize from whatever country, because we produce maize, and because we are getting the maize from a certain country, we will not charge you duty, but there will be a surtax of 10%.
That also literally acts as an import duty.
Yeah. So it's more of avoidance to comply rather than evasion, because evasion is a violation of the actual law or rule. But in this case, surtax is not part of what you have asked me to reduce. Therefore, I can introduce it. But in terms of trade protocols, it has an equivalent effect of making imports expensive. And
so both COMESA countries who propose that we should be a free trade area and SADC as a free trade area, have we achieved that?
I think to a big extent, COMESA has done that, and they have had a very serious follow-up mechanism where a member state complains about certain fees imposed by another country which has equivalent effect to customs duty. SADC at the time didn't have. I don't know about now, but at the time that I audited SADC member states, they didn't have that. So countries were doing whatever they wanted, and that made transformation from a trade area to a free trade area difficult. Because that was the idea, is to transform that agreement into a free trade area so that goods and people can move freely.
Again, when I was a High Commissioner in South Africa, because South Africa is our biggest trading partner as Zambia in the region. Every time we are in a season for tomato and onions, Zambia bans the import from South Africa. And then I will have officials from, their trade and industry breathing their necks on me and saying, why are you banning? You are violating these trade protocols that we've signed. Why do we do that? And it's like we don't educate our people, because our people will just rise. No, we have tomato, and the tomato is rotting at Soweto. But they don't know that their government has signed protocols and agreements that should allow a South African to import into a market. And sadly, we have not promoted our farmers to export into South Africa. And therefore, they see that trade as unfair trade to them.
Ambassador, you have put it rightly. First and foremost, as a country, when you sign up to certain international protocols, the first thing you must bear in mind is that you must comply. Okay? And it's shameful that you sign up to something and you do the exact opposite. Okay? The case of SADC and COMESA is such that we still have that tendency to protect our local industry, when in fact you have signed up to opening up. Okay? Yes, of course, there are certain mechanisms that are provided for, both under the COMESA Treaty and the SADC Trade Protocol, where you can evoke certain industry protection mechanisms. But that has to be agreed. You have to run it through the process. You don't just wake up one day and you ban. Okay? But it comes back to our production. How productive is our economy, especially in agricultural goods? Okay? Because if we were that productive, we would not even bother about banning anything. Because we will be competitive.
That even brings me to the issue of maize. Again, another issue I would have is South African companies that have invested in the agricultural sector here. They even support, groups of farmers to grow maize, and they go on the market and buy and store this maize. And now when they want to, for example, export it to other markets, so including South Africa, Then there is a ban in Zambia. But they say, look, we invested money, we paid farmers, and they grew this maize for us. Now we can't take out the maize. Again, it comes down to issues of production.
Exactly. What we need to do as a country is to invest in production, especially of food. Okay, production of everything, manufacturing of everything, if we can. But we should not compromise on production of food. Whatever it takes, whether it's at small scale, household level, whether it's at medium scale, commercial, we just must produce food. And there must be appropriate policies by government that should guide that. Appropriate policies that should support that. Okay? And let me just digress a bit. If you look at our country now, we are experiencing drought. Okay? The reality is that it's not all the parts of this country are experiencing drought.
By drought, yes.
I'll tell you something. I have done my maize production in Chinsali. Okay, I'm sitting.
Are you affected by the current El Nino weather effect?
No, not at all.
Rain is
not at all. In fact, the complaint of my brother who is managing that on my behalf is that there is too much rain. He's worried. Okay, he's worried that probably the maize may be damaged by the rains, but the maize is healthy, and we expect a very big crop. So there must be a scientific approach to the way we produce goods, the way we produce food, especially maize in this country. It is clear, and nobody must bury their head in the sand. Maize can no longer grow everywhere in Zambia at the moment. And the sooner we realize that and do something about it, the better. Because we have first wastage of fertilizer. If you take fertilizer to a place where it will not be useful, it will just be wasted. And most of that fertilizer finds its way to commercial farmers being sold because
it is of no use. I remember when I was PS in Western Province, I asked agricultural experts why they send the same amount of both maize seed and fertilizer to Western Province when most parts of it are dry. I said, for example, in Western Province, I wish you could support rice farming because it's more suitable. And also vegetable farmings in the plains, when the water recedes from the plains. I said you just can't dump maize seed and fertilizer on everyone that may not even need it. Yes, there are parts of Western Province, for example, in Kalomo area, Kaoma area, that are heavy and they are good for maize growth. But there are parts like Kalabo that are totally dry. Then you have these plains that are very fertile, that are good for vegetables, fruits and vegetables, and then we don't utilize that. I said, can we recognize that you just can't dump maize across the country and think you yield? In fact, the yield per hectare in certain areas is not the same yield, for example, in Northwestern Province where you have a lot of rain, or in Chinsali. So that I agree with you. Let's come to President Michael Sata in 2011. He has appointed you as head of this inquiry. Speak to that. You've come from Botswana, Haberon. You've responded to a national call by the president. What are your terms of reference? What is the trouble with ZRA? Why does the president want a commission of inquiry?
At that point, there were some contracts that were running in ZRA that the government, I don't want to personalize it to the president, because even the letter of appointment, I got it from the Ministry of Finance. And as you know, the Zambia Revenue Authority is managed at policy level by the Ministry of Finance. So the government decided to set up that commission of inquiry to investigate some contracts. There was the contract that related to the scanners, where scanners that were bought by government through a loan, a Chinese loan, were being run by a private company, I think a private international company, and government was getting 15%.
Yet the scanners were bought by the state through a loan.
Yes.
Then the operator gives government revenue of only 15%.
Yes, exactly. Then there were also some issues surrounding tax incentives, where the new government thought some incentives that were given at the time were inappropriate and needed to be reviewed. There were certain other operational issues within ZRA, especially relating to some contracts with the private sector that the government needed to be reviewed, to be looked at. So our terms of reference were to really investigate those contracts and and also advise government on the way forward. The other key issue was the concession of the Kasumbalesa border post. Yeah.
Again, what were the concerns around the...
There were two major concerns.
Yeah.
Number one, it was also about revenue. And number two was the alleged cost of the project. Okay. Clearly, if we start with the Kasumbalesa quickly, the Kasumbalesa project was concessioned to a company that was originally from Israel. And that company put up infrastructure to facilitate movement, the same thing that we are talking about, facilitation. And the revenue sharing mechanism was not...
Again, fair.
Was not fair. I think government was progressively getting something from 5%, 10%, increasing over years. And the justification for that was the concessionaire was claiming that he had put in $25 million.
Worth of investment.
Worth of investment. So the government wanted us to ascertain that. So the Commission of Inquiry was set up, which I chaired, and it consisted of people from government, various government departments, ministries. We had justice there, we had finance, we had, that time it was works and supply, it's now infrastructure. Yeah. So we set up and started calling witnesses. I can't go into details because the report is on the internet. It's a public document.
In summary, what were your findings?
In summary, our findings were that a lot of these contracts were fraudulent and they were not properly awarded following the established procurement process. In the Kasumbalesa situation, we found that the infrastructure was not worth 25 million. In fact, we further discovered that the Zambian money, the money borrowed by the concessionaire to build that infrastructure, also built the Kasumbalesa infrastructure, the DRC infrastructure.
Okay,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
he used our money to build infrastructure across.
Yeah.
So he could have used 25 million for both borders.
Yeah. And remained with some good change.
Yeah.
Because our valuation of the Zambian infrastructure was $3 million.
Wow.
That was our
from the claim of 25 million.
Yeah, but the claim and the liability put on the Zambian government was 25. Okay.
The findings, I've read some of them, were brilliant. But you suffered a setback on the day the media were called and you're supposed to present your report. And all of a sudden, the president just refused to accept it and said, you people are not serious. Just speak to that.
I'm happy you've given me an opportunity to respond to this, because a lot of people ask me this question, and my family members were really distressed because they were watching on TV. You remember it was live.
Yes.
What really happened? First, let me declare that I can't blame President Sata for what he did to me. I fully understood.
When you learned of the other facts.
And he was right. Yes. He was very right. What really happened was, with my team, a night before, we drafted our presentation to the president, okay, which was very detailed. It had all the objectives. It had the summary of our findings, okay? So, and of course, we had 5 reports properly done, nice cover and for presentation to the president. So, as required, I got some handlers from State House who visited my house in the night, and they said the president would like to go through your report tomorrow so that he has an appreciation of
what it is that you be presenting.
Yeah, and the talking points. So I got the document that we did with my team, and I gave it to the presidential handlers, and they took it to him. That was around 17 hours. In the night around 21, I was called, okay, by the press assistants to the president and said, okay, he has gone through the report. He says it's fine, but there are a few changes that you need to change here and there. I think they were just 2 paragraphs, okay? And I understood why, because they were political in nature. He wanted me to include 2 paragraphs. The rest of the thing was okay. It was a 4-paged presentation, okay, which had everything, basically a summary of the report and a focus on our recommendations. So I made those changes, and I quickly drove to State House, gave it to the guys that I was interacting with. 1 hour later, they called me to say, we are good to go. The president is happy. Okay, so I kept that document. Before the president came for the presentation, I think the presentation, if I recall, because that incident, was interesting in my career, in my life. I think it was 10 hours. So before 10 hours, around 8, I got a call from Cabinet Office to say, you have not presented a copy of the report that you are presenting to the president. And it's a requirement that Cabinet sees that report. It's a requirement that Cabinet approves it for presentation to the president. Okay? So I said, no. In fact, what I've done is I've shared that copy with the president.
The president's office.
And the president has actually approved it through his staff. Honestly, I had Cabinet Office represented on my team. Very senior officials from Cabinet. Nobody ever told me about that requirement. And this is 1 hour before the event. We can't start changing things. They said, no.
We can't delay the president.
They said, no. Nothing will go to the president without our approval. So what do? I had worked in ZRI, really, but not mainstream government. Civil service. So I got scared. So I had to consult the Minister of Finance, who was like the principal. So, Minister, I sent you a copy of what I needed to present. And there were some maneuvers in the night, but I didn't want to disturb you. Okay? There were 1 or 2 paragraphs that the presidency suggested. But I've looked at them, they have 0 impact on the substance
of the report.
So I had to do them even without your approval. But the main things that are there, he said, no, you listen to Cabinet Office. At that stage, Cabinet Office had actually drafted what my speech should be. And they prevailed on me. My minister was supporting them. And they said, this is what you're going to present. So really what happened that day was when I started reading the report that I was given by Cabinet Office, the president got confused.
It differed substantially with the report the president had.
It was shorter. I think it was 2 pages. What I gave the president was, I think, 8 or so pages. I can't remember the exact number of pages. What I was given by Cabinet Office was 8 pages. Basically said,
2 pages.
2 pages. Thanking the president for having appointed us and confirming to him that we had done the job, and here is the report.
That's why he got annoyed.
That's why he got upset.
He says, where is the meat?
Because
what were you investigating?
Exactly. And actually what was going, only that he didn't talk about it, but what was going through his mind was, I stayed late to read the report that this human being is coming to present to me, and he presents something different. Anybody, even me, if I was in his shoes, I would have been upset.
Reacted the same way. Okay.
That's exactly what happened.
Oh, no, thank you for the...
So,
but,
for me...
a process like that, that commission of inquiry, had too many stakeholders, too many powerful forces. Those contracts were not only fraudulent, they could send people to jail.
Yeah, that's true.
So probably you were politically naive. Being a technocrat, you didn't realize the forces at play.
Yeah.
And I think there must have been a lot of backroom interventions.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
And you gave the report to the president being innocent and naive, and you thought, well, this is how government works.
Yeah.
And then you fell into the trap where you were blasted in front of cameras.
But the good thing which surprised me, because immediately after that, in fact, while I was doing that inquiry, I got a job in South Africa. Okay? So that same afternoon, I flew out of the country. Because I didn't want people asking me questions like, what happened here, what, tukemfumu. So kuchifukushia and whatever. If ever kuchinsa, you get my point. So my wife advised me very strongly. I think you leave. Go and take up this appointment in South Africa. Forget about this. So that's.
But like I said, I encourage people to read that inquiry. It was detailed. It was professional.
But this is what I
gathered the facts, and all these things suffered over just those.
Yeah, but this is what I'm coming to.
Yeah.
A day after, I received a call to say the president now understands what happened, because I had to do a short report, okay, which I sent to one of the people that I was dealing with. Okay, I even spoke to him verbally, but he said, put it in writing so that I can take it to the president. Okay, because he's very, very annoyed with you. So I got a call to say, no, the president regrets what happened and is very mad with the people that did that to you. Okay, at least they should have started by telling him before changing, because he had a different, and he had prepared notes. To respond. To respond to the things that, and then I do something else. So he ordered that report must be published. Okay. The president ordered that the report must be, and it was published on a government website. And I think it's still there. If you search it, it's still
government printers. Yes,
it's still on the internet.
I obtained a copy, I think, from government printers.
Yes. So he ordered that this report must be made public, and it was published online. So the guy even sent me a link to say, the president has ordered, and we have actually put it online for people to download and read. But of course, it is a very big document. But I was happy, I was relieved by that. And
by that action.
But that is what, but that's how, it was very embarrassing, really.
Thanks for clarifying and I think educating and informing our viewers about that particular matter. And I've personally learned. You are quiet between 2011 and 2015, 2016. Then in 2016, I think in September, we hear you are appointed Commissioner General at Zambia Revenue Authority. And this is where I'm coming now to the meat. Zambia Revenue Authority, what is its role? You were privileged to have served as Commissioner General. Just speak to that.
The primary responsibility of ZRA is to collect revenues, okay? To collect taxes on behalf of government. That's the primary objective. That's why the institution was formed. But of course, because of the customs component, it also has other responsibilities of border management, trade facilitation, and of course, protection of our economy from hazardous importations, and even in collaboration with other security agencies, narcotic drugs. Customs participates heavily in ensuring that harmful substances are not brought into the country or taken out of the country. So those are the secondary responsibilities of ZRA, but the primary one is revenue collection.
Okay. And why can't we raise our own money? Why do we have to depend on donors? Why do we have to depend on cooperating partners? Why do we have to depend on outsiders to run our economy? It's like we have to rely on the neighbor to buy our mealie meal.
I think when you look at a country, scholars of strategy will tell you that when you're analyzing a country, you should look at what they call Pestel analysis. Okay? Pestel analysis basically refers to the analysis of the political situation in the country, the economic situation in the country, the social, cultural social, the technology available, okay, to do certain things, in this case, revenue collection. The legal framework, very key. Okay, how protected are the investors? How strong are the laws in terms of tax evasion, and so on. And of course, others add another thing, which is the environment. Okay, when you do this analysis, and when it comes to taxation, you can condense this analysis into 3 major factors that affect revenue performance. Okay, you do your PESTEL, but when you're focusing on taxation, you should focus on 3 major issues. The first one is the economy.
Yeah.
Okay? Because the economy directly determines your tax base. You cannot expect more revenues from an economy which is shrinking.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
It's actually weird to think like that. It's surprising that you should expect an increase in the revenues when your economy is shrinking. So the most important thing is, how is your economy performing?
Yeah.
Because your macroeconomic fundamentals now will inform your revenue target.
Yes.
Okay? It can't be, there is no other way. What is your projected inflation? What is your projected growth in your GDP? What is your projected exchange rate? All these macroeconomic fundamentals will inform your tax base and therefore your tax target. Okay? So the most important thing is the economy.
Yeah.
Again, this PESTEL analysis, you can condense it into another factor, which is the second factor, which is your tax policy. Okay? Given your tax base, given your performance of your economy, what are the appropriate policies that will enhance your revenue collection without discouraging investment? Yeah. Because we are not talking about government investment here. We are talking about private sector investment. And private investment is driven by profit. So you will not tax 100% of somebody's profit and expect them to operate in your economy. So you need to balance. So your tax policy kicks in. The final and equally important factor is tax administration. Yeah. Your ZRI.
How you administer it.
Yeah. Do you have the right people at ZRI? Do they have the right zeal? Do they have the right strategy? Are they properly resourced? Are you looking after those employees well to avoid corruption and so on? Does ZRI have vehicles to conduct operations? And so you need to have these 3 factors right.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you, with the resource base that Zambia has, with the resource base that Zambia has, if these 3 factors are right, you may not need to depend on foreign aid, you may not need to depend on grants, you can actually generate sufficient revenues as a country.
To run your own economy.
Exactly, you can.
Comparison to SADC country, how are we doing in tax revenue, raising money locally?
I really don't know about now, but I can just speak for the period that I managed that institution.
Yeah, that's correct.
When I joined ZRI in 2016, the revenue contribution to GDP was 14%.
14%.
Yeah, specifically 14.3%. Okay? Within 5 years, we were able to raise that to 20%.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And it was a progressive increase, despite the COVID. Of course, we were hit a bit during the COVID. I think during the COVID, we were around 17%, progressing towards, because our target was 21%. If you look at the MTEF framework that the Minister of Finance developed, it was to get to 21% by 2021. Okay? So we were at 17%. When COVID hit, we slowed down. I think we dropped from 17% to something like 16 point something. But we were able to quickly catch up in 2020, and by 2021 we were actually around 20%.
Wow.
Yeah, 19 point something percent, almost 20%.
So that's an average in the region.
But the region, fortunately, Zambia was doing a lot better. I don't know about now, but we are doing very well. We were only competing with South Africa, which that time was standing at around 30%, 29% to 30%.
You worked with the National Treasury in South Africa for you consulted with them, what have they done right? How come they can hit 30% of their GDP in tax revenue?
You need to go back to the three factors I talked about.
Yeah.
The economy. Clearly,
it's a bigger economy.
It's a bigger economy. It has a very solid manufacturing base. Okay, its agriculture is world standard. It's very good. Okay, so in terms of the economic fundamentals, the South African economy is bigger and better than Zambia.
And more people pay tax.
Exactly, even in terms of population. But compared to Zambia, despite our small economy and so on, we have a lot of natural resources that we have not exploited. Okay? We have a lot of natural resources that we have not exploited. And some of them include minerals. Better management of our minerals can change this economy within a very short time. Agriculture. We need to get our agriculture right. And I liked it when you talked about competitive advantage. We can't grow something everywhere. We need to identify
what we should grow.
Yes, in what crops is Western Province competitive, Southern Province competitive, Northwestern, Central, and focus our efforts and resources in those areas. Okay? Then you produce food that you can now trade locally. Because don't forget the fact that internal trade is actually even more important than international trade. There are countries that are under international sanctions right now, and South Africa was during apartheid. But they were able to develop their internal trade to an extent where the country became self-sufficient. If you become self-sufficient, the excess you can export. Okay? So we need to get a better management of our resources. The other resource that I always talk about, and I've made several proposals at various forums, is land. Zambia has vast land.
How can we monetize land?
Exactly. Okay? Some people that have serious properties, serious land in this country don't even receive land rates. They don't even know the value of the land because the value has never been valued by anyone. And they don't receive any bill from anyone. Not from Minister of Lands, not from councils, not from anybody. We can make a lot of money from land. But unfortunately, I'm a proponent of private sector-like management of government. Okay?
What do you mean when you say that?
What I mean is, you will not rely on the Ministry of Lands to manage land.
Okay.
You need to develop or set up a new authority.
Like we did with
ZRA, exactly.
And we brought ZRA.
A land management authority with professionals employed on merit, experience to manage that authority. It can be a self-financing authority. You don't need treasury, you don't need yellow book, budget, no. This is an institution that can generate its own money to finance itself. The same applies to mines. It's clear. For so many years, we have relied on the means of mines to manage our minerals. We can't. We can no longer continue like that. You need a mines and minerals authority, okay? Composed of professionals, Zambians that have worked in the mining companies, or Zambians that have managed several sectors, different sectors of the economy. Most Zambians, especially in mining, those that worked in ZCCM and mines that came after ZCCM, are you aware that most of those are working outside the country? Some of them are general managers in some of these international mining companies. Zambians. We can get those people to come and help us manage that authority so that we limit Ministry of Lands and we limit Ministry of Mines to policy formulation, not operations.
Operations should be run
Yes.
And the example of ZRA is a good example.
Ministry of Mines, you would want them to do an inspection, you find they have no vehicle. Or if they have a vehicle, probably they have no petrol, they have no fuel. You don't need that. You need a very, very focused and professional organization to manage our minerals. Once we do that, and we align government policy, both tax policy or whatever policy, we align it to ensure that we maximize the benefits from these minerals without discouraging investment. I'm putting that rider because it's important. Many people view taxation as an anti-investment. No. I've always argued to people that when somebody is considering to invest in a country, taxation is the least of their worries.
Of their concerns.
It's the least of their worries, because tax everywhere in the world is part of your business costs. And you factor it in your business plan.
So why do politicians give these
tax incentives? It's wrong. It is actually wrong and retrogressive. It doesn't benefit the country. I'll give you a good example. You remember I told you that I was part of the team that developed that set up the ZDA.
Yeah.
Okay? So we were very ambitious in the ZDA Act. You remember we gave that, is it a 20-year tax holiday?
Yes.
Which was graduated after 5 years, after 7.5 years, after 10 years. And, you know, I can't remember the exact period we gave. What companies used to do, they would invest and get those incentives. They operate for 5 years, 10 years. When they're about to start paying full taxes, they close the company.
We saw Smart Center, we saw all those companies.
They wind up the company and start another one.
With a new name.
Yes.
Again, obtain those incentives.
Exactly.
So the incentives were abused.
Tax incentives easily get abused, and there is no law that will compel you to force somebody who have given tax incentives to do what they have promised to do. Yeah. I'll give you an example. Right now, we had a conversation with FQM, for example, that they will invest $1.5 billion.
$1.5 billion, yes.
Yeah, $1.5 billion.
1.5, yeah.
Okay? Over a period of 5 years, in order to increase production and so on. And everyone is hype about it because we want to move our production to 3 million tons. Okay? We are now going below 800. We were at 800. The production has been going down.
Yes.
Okay? This is second year of those incentives. You have no law that compels you to say, hey, guys, we agreed this. Where are you? We don't have a proper monitoring mechanism. Who will tell you that these guys have actually now, of the 1.5 billion, they have brought 1 billion? They will bring 4 or 5 machines, each worth 500 million or whatever, and the 1 billion will
yeah.
You get my point? So without that legislation that can hold the people that are getting incentives accountable and ensure that they do what they promise to do to get those incentives, it's a nullity. It's wrong. It only goes to increase the profits of those companies. We
saw the mining agreements that were given to all the mines that were operating for 20 years.
The development agreements.
The development agreements. They didn't pay tax. They abuse the incentives, and there are companies that became billionaires, were opened in another jurisdiction using revenue from Zambia, because the mining development agreements just excuse them from paying what they could. In fact, that's, I think, what motivated Ngandu Magande to introduce windfall tax in 2008, because he saw that the mining sector was abusing the development agreements, and their tax obligation was literally nil, other than pay as you earn for their workers. You are not popular people, you tax collectors. From the biblical times, even Zacchaeus was held in bad esteem. They think you are corrupt, you steal from the poor. You know why people think like that? Because few people pay tax. In fact, in our country, the few workers are sustaining our country through their pay as you earn. The big businesses have incentives. They can claim capital allowances. They can claim all this. What should we do? First, you have a few people paying tax in this country. We're a population of 20 million. And the numbers are not good. I was looking at them the other day. Of the 300,000 people eligible to pay tax, again, a small number is the only one paying taxes. How do we broaden taxes? And then how do we make taxes equitable, fair? You can't have a multi-million-dollar company paying less tax than a worker, a teacher, who gets just 5,000 kwacha or 7,000 kwacha.
Remember, Ambassador, I talked about 3 things.
The
economy, tax policy, and tax administration. If we start from tax administration, the tax administration must balance between tax compliance and tax enforcement. Okay? Tax compliance advocates for voluntary compliance. How do you get voluntary compliance? Tax education. You may recall what we did in 2018, 2019. Okay? We realized the economy was shaky, COVID set in 2019, what do we do? Okay? We will not have fresh revenues because all the companies are struggling. So we had to change our strategy. We got resources, more resources into debt management. So we went for debt authentication, audits, agreeing in a friendly manner with taxpayers. This is what our records are showing. If you have something different, please come, let's talk. At the same time, we convinced government, okay? We convinced government to introduce tax amnesty, okay? So that we do away with interest and penalties. There is no tax authority that would thrive on penalizing people and charging exorbitant interest. You kill companies. So we said, let's remove these penalties and interest. We focus on the principle, we discuss. We raked in billions and billions of money. Why? Because we evoked voluntary compliance.
Okay.
A friendly approach to tax management is key in getting compliance. You've heard of the saying in English of a bad carpenter. A bad carpenter.
Yeah.
A bad carpenter with a hammer. Everything else looks like a nail.
No, yes.
You get my point? If you approach your tax your tax management
with a hammer,
you lose taxpayers. Because others will go under or they will start evading. Okay? So you need to balance between enforcement and compliance. Give incentives to companies to comply.
Yeah.
Unless you have a worst case scenario, should you go for enforcement? Because once you strangle business, they will lose capacity to generate more revenues.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the answer to your question is that as tax administration, you must ensure that as much as possible, you get compliance. Okay? And then tax policy, if we go to tax policy, it will help you. Who do you tax? For example, a lot of people criticized me for having focused so much on the mines. Okay? And we got billions of money from the mines. Not in kwacha, in dollars. Okay? Because we changed the rules. We told them to start paying taxes in dollars. Okay? So that we also support the exchange rate.
Yeah.
The argument I had.
In fact, let's talk to the mining policy.
Let me finish this line of thought.
Yeah.
That criticism that I was unable to expand the tax base and tax the informal sector, my argument was always, can I get the formal sector? Can I get the bigger guys compliant first? Before I start chasing that poor woman on the streets selling tomatoes and onions. Okay? Before I start enforcing on these poor people, can I first get these multi-billion companies, mostly international companies, compliant? Because they were not.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw all those cases and audits that we had and so on. They were not compliant. So why should I spend 20,000 kwacha on enforcing taxes in markets when I can spend 5,000 kwacha on one officer to go and audit a mining company and get billions? Because there I will spend 20,000 kwacha and collect 200 kwacha. Because of the base. Those people are struggling to feed their families. I'm not saying they should not contribute anything. They do, through consumption taxes, through VAT and whatever.
I was coming to the issue of the mining sector because it's very critical. We export up to 70% of our exports come from copper. The contribution of the mining sector to our economy, to the GDP, is usually under 8-10%, at the highest maybe 12%. So you can see that while mining anchors our economy, its contribution to our own economy is poor. And mostly due to, I think, our taxation policy with the mines. We give them more incentives. We allow them to cheat us. In fact, there have been studies and reports that have been done by Oxfam and others that say that Zambia is losing up to $3 billion, in illicit financing and avoidance of tax by multinationals, these very respected companies, and they've been cited, for example, like Vedanta, Zambia Sugar, and others, that the country is losing $3 billion a year. Now, $3 billion a year, you have to put it in context. We are struggling with the IMF for 2.5 years for $1.3 billion. Yet we are losing these huge sums from the mining sector. You and the ministers of finance caused controversy when you pinpointed that VAT was actually fraudulent. In fact, it goes back to 2011. I think Minister of Finance, Alexander Chanda, tried to introduce some policies that the mining companies, when they export their proceeds, should report into central bank and not in Geneva or in Canada or in Australia. I think the mining companies fought hard that those statutory instruments were fought. Speak to us your experience with the mining sector. You condemned VAT. You said it was a fraudulent scheme. It's not VAT refunds claims from the mining sector. Then you came and introduced sales tax to avoid the pitfalls of the VAT refund claims that you were complaining about.
Okay. First, let me talk to the issue of tax contribution of mining companies to GDP.
Yeah.
And of course, mining companies as a contribution to the economy. Okay? The two are different. The revenue contribution to GDP is low, small. Their contribution to the economy is big, because it's our major economic activity. However, if you have a major economic activity that is contributing less and less to revenue, then there's a disconnect there. Yeah. Because what I know is that countries that produce oil, their major revenues come from oil. Okay, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and all these other countries. If you are into manufacturing, okay, your revenues will come from manufacturing. And you find that even governments announce huge revenue uptake from such activities. It's not the case in Zambia. And it hasn't been, I think, until 2016 to 2021. Okay? When you are looking at a contribution of the mines to revenues, you must take out pay as you earn. And this is where people get it wrong. They get pay as you earn, they add VAT, they add company income tax, they add mineral road tax and say, so much was contributed. No. Pay as you earn is not paid by the mines. It's paid by employees of the mines. VAT is a consumption tax. Whatever VAT may be collected by any mines, and I don't know of any that collects VAT without getting a refund, but if there is any VAT paid by the mines, it's taken back. You can't take that as a contribution to revenues. Okay? You can't. Because it's a refundable tax. Now mineral road tax is deductible, meaning that when you do your income tax returns, you must take out all the mineral road tax that you paid, because it's not a final tax. What we have had in Zambia is that most mining companies, except one, and I can name it, FQM, most mining companies in this country were declaring losses and they never paid income tax.
Yeah.
The income tax was largely coming from FQM. So when you see ZRA reporting so much company income tax was collected from, it was basically from one mine.
One mine.
The rest of the mines were in losses because, again, of the tax policies. We have these capital allowances. We have the brought forward claims. Losses, you have all these things that just crowds the taxation landscape, which you can deal with through simplification. But we can discuss that later.
Yeah.
But for VAT is a refundable tax. It's a consumption tax. Okay? What we were saying at the time, when I go to ZRA, I found a huge debt in terms of unpaid VAT. Huge debt. Okay? So, one of my major problems was that if this money belongs to the mining companies, and we have taken out so much money as government without paying them as refunds, how are these companies operating?
Yeah.
So much working capital has been held in unpaid VAT. So I need a strategy to dismantle this VAT. Okay? But if I have to dismantle this VAT, I must put a stop to accumulation.
Yeah.
You get my point? I will not solve a problem that I'm still creating.
Yes, yes.
And supporting. So with my team, we started looking at options. What options do we have? We realized that in a country which is largely import dependent, with very weak, or maybe if I say non-existent, I'll be wrong, because there is a bit of manufacturing in this country, but very small manufacturing base. VAT cannot work. It can't, because it's a consumption tax that should be collected from people that consume goods locally produced or imported. Okay?
Yeah.
So you have all these imports flowing in with refundable import VAT. You have a small manufacturing base, and you have a mining sector that almost 98% exports all their produce, and therefore all their VAT is refundable. How do you operate such a tax? So we reached a stage where a tax started creating debt. Now, any scholar of taxation, you cannot have a tax that creates debt.
Like the VAT
That's not
does.
Exactly. So there is a problem. So we did a serious interrogation of this problem, and we said, how do we deal with this? So we proposed to government to say, can we put a stop to accumulation of these areas by introducing a consumption tax? Of course, when somebody first called it sales tax, it was, people were all over. No, we can't be going back. We can't, but there are countries that are still operating sales tax today in the developed world. So going backwards where? What we were advocating for, other than the name, you could have called it anything
else.
Other than the name, what we were advocating for was a restructuring of VAT so that that tax stops creating debt. You've heard recently there were discussions in government circles to stop, to see how they can manage that VAT refund that is going to the mines. It's in millions, hundreds of millions of dollars every month.
In fact, that makes the mine houses not to pay tax, because they'll tell you when you go to collect your taxes, they'll say, but you owe us.
So there are discussions to an extent of saying, if they get a VAT refund, they should not go to the market and buy dollars. But this is what was happening. We could see it. We could trail it with the Bank of Zambia. You give a VAT refund to a mining company today, the following day they are on the market buying dollars and externalizing. Now, this is supposed to be working capital. That's a red flag number one. Red flag number two, these are companies that are prepared to give 10 to 15% of what is refunded to a tax consultant. And I must confess, I made money as a tax consultant. Remember, I was dealing with this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I made a lot of money from that job of representing companies.
So what does that tell you if they are willing to pay up to 15%?
No, it means that's not working capital. That's change. It means that money has not affected
their operations.
You get my point? Now, that coupled with the, I'm sorry, because if I say incompetence, it might be too hard. But the training of our officers, even at the time that I was leaving, because we tried to send them abroad, attach them to other tax administration, but these are very few. The capacity of officers within ZRA to audit mining companies
remains low.
Yes.
Remains low,
It was work in progress.
Did you consider maybe rely on external auditors to help you?
We did that. I'm sure you heard there was, is it Sweden or Finland? One of these two countries, I can't remember. Before I joined ZRA, they had set up a mines unit, where they identified officers, trained them into auditing and forensic auditing and so on. And we also introduced what we are calling a large data, bulk analysis. We did all those things, but the skills cannot match the skills in the mining sector. So you have all
first of all, the mining sector producing billions of dollars, the first thing they will do is to invest in tax consultant and their tax department.
And hiring,
to hire the best in the world,
yes,
and ensure that they pay as less tax as possible. Yeah.
So what we needed to do with the reform, I still call it reform, not abolishing, reform of VAT.
tax.
First was to put a stop to accumulation.
Yeah. So
Deal with the arrears,
tax,
pay off all the arrears,
Yeah.
audit the arrears, pay off the arrears. And then, at a very, very low rate, we were considering a rate as low as 3%. And in one final meeting before, I remember it was Honorable Mwanakatwe, before she went to Parliament, we even had an option of 2.5% non-refundable consumption tax. Non-refundable. You pay that. If it's the mining company, they bring their machinery, they pay that 2.5%.
They don't pay 16%, 17%.
No, they pay that
just
and that's it. They don't get a refund. Look, the time and the resources you invest in checking these refunds, going to the mines to audit them, and those audits yield nothing. Everything comes as declared by the mining companies. So on a monthly basis, you owe them hundreds of millions.
So in fact, what you are saying is the little money paid by our taxpayers goes to pay these VAT refunds to the big mining companies.
Ideally, it should be one-on-one.
Yes.
Okay?
Because it's supposed to be a refund. A refund should not be a debt. I collected, I should give it to you.
And that was my problem when I joined ZRI. That was my problem because I realized that the tax was negative.
Yes, how can...
The accumulation of refunds per month was higher than the VAT collected in that given month.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know what the analysis shows now, but that time that is what alarmed me. To say, if this is a refund, I asked my economics team to say, guys, just pick 1 month, pick 1 quarter, pick 1 year. Let's do 1-to-1.
Yes.
You find that there are more refunds, claims, than the actual taxes collected. So which shows some elements of cheating and inflating of refund claims. So really, whether we like it or not, we can bury our heads in the sand. VAT is problematic in this country and needs to be reformed or needs to be changed to something else. You need a final tax that you do not have to bother about refunding unless it's wrongly collected or wrongly computed, like what happens to all other taxes. We do refund company income tax, we refund pay as you earn when there is an overpayment because of miscalculation. Let it be like that. But the way VAT is structured, even some of the countries that are proponents of VAT in Africa don't have VAT in their countries. You get my point? And this is where you ought to be convinced that you can actually customize some of these taxes. Don't always be saying, but this hasn't been done in country X. This has not been done. No, you look at your unique economic conditions and customize your own. You can. It's only people that developed these taxes. Even here, you have educated people who can develop taxes that are aligned to our economic realities.
Border and border management. I am sad to see the queues at Kasumbalesa that extend from Kitwe right up to the border. The chaos at Chirundu, the chaos, at Kazungula, but at least now we have a bridge, but the chaos, what is causing that? I just talked about the turnaround. In fact, South Africa, when I was High Commissioner, decided to invest in the rail system, and they even hired DBS South Africa to work with my office. They were willing to invest up to $1 billion because they said if the tracking system is failing, the trucks are taking up to 21 days, 30 days, some 2 months just to do a turnaround. Maybe the rail system will be better. And we started working on that. But it is that issue of the congestion at the borders. What is the problem? And then what happened to the one border stops post? That mechanism doesn't seem to work. Chirundu is one of, like you said, pioneering one border post. What has happened to it? Why doesn't congestion at Kasumbalesa go away?
Yeah, I think I can speak for ZRA on this particular issue. I think it has very little to do with ZRA facilitation of these trucks. Okay? When you see trucks accumulating at Kasumbalesa all the way up to Chingola, Kitwe, it has nothing to do with ZRA. because these are goods that are making exits out of ZRA, either as transit goods or exports out of Zambia into the DRC. The challenge is on the DRC side. These trucks have already been cleared. Okay? They have already been cleared. If you talk about congestion at Chirundu, which I'm reliably informed has subsided, it has reduced because most of the traffic has actually diverted towards Kazungula. And also the facilitation at Chirundu has been very good. But the problem of Kasumbalesa has everything to do with the rate at which the DRC customs authorities accept goods into their country.
It is not our problem.
No, it's not. That I can say with absolute certainty, it is not, because those goods have already been cleared at Nakonde. They have been cleared at... you see, the problem with Kasumbalesa is that it's receiving goods from 4 major borders of Zambia. It's receiving from Kazungula, it's receiving from Chirundu, it's receiving from Mwami, and receiving from Nakonde. All these trucks entering through all these major borders, plus smaller borders, they converge on that small road into the DRC. Because the other routes into the DRC are impassable. So whatever ZRA can do, and even in my situation, I used to have those congestions. The only difference is that I developed a very good rapport with the DG for customs in DRC. So every time we saw that that thing is about to happen, I used to either fly into Lubumbashi, meet him, or drive to the border. We meet at the border and resolve. I would be there for 3-4 days and to ensure that the issue is resolved. Because it has a lot of players come into play. You have other security agencies within Congo. You have the rivalry of transporters. You have all sorts of things, but not so much on the Zambian side. In fact, nothing on the Zambian side. It's mostly into Congo. So when you see that accumulation, Zambia may have done everything. Because some of those is just, oh, this is a truck that entered transit into Congo, yeah, fine, go. You say 1 minute clearance, okay? But to cross over from Zambia into Congo, that's where the problem is.
Yeah. The revenue leaks, smugglers, people that declare that they're bringing vehicles for, in transit, but the vehicles end up here. How did you deal with these revenue leaks? Yeah.
The first thing I did was I realized that we had, through our system, introduced so much corruption in the clearance of goods, okay? Because the value of the goods depended on the officer you found at the border. So I decided
the discretion was so much to the officers.
Yes. So I decided to standardize the prices, okay, based on the year and model of a car, so that it's predictable. Even when you're ordering, you can go on the ZRA portal. I don't know if it's still there, and you do your own calculations. You will know that by the time my vehicle arrives, subject to the exchange rate, my tax will be 15,000 kwacha, it will be 10,000 kwacha, it will be what? If I employ, you remember that famous story of one type of vehicles that we forgot in our standardization. That
when they brought
expensive,
the Bugatti,
yes, it
Veyron worth $1.5 million,
exactly.
And it could only pay how much?
Yeah, because it was standard. It was according to it is a car, and it was this model. Maybe 19 whatever. So anyway, we dealt with that immediately. But what we did was to standardize so that we removed discretion. The other thing that contributes to smuggling in ZRA is job insecurity on the part of officers. Okay? When I joined ZRA, we found that from ZRA 06, these are examining officers with 2 bars at the border, all the way up to Commissioner General, they were on 3-year contracts. 3-year contracts. And then there was so much discretion on management as to who gets a contract.
There was no guarantee.
There was no guarantee
that you'd retain or your contract will be renewed.
So in the process, within the 3 years, officers were paying themselves. They would look for deals in case my contract is not renewed. So what I did in 2017 was to abolish contracts from 06 all the way up to 04. So that these category of officers, who are actually the major drivers of revenues in the organization are permanent and pensionable. And to support them, I also introduced a local pension fund within ZRI, other than NAPSA. So ZRI officers contribute to NAPSA as a national thing, but they also have their own ZRI pension fund, which they even draw from on, depending on how much money they make, per quarter or per year, or whatever, the pension fund declares some money to them, because they invest. We had a pension manager who invests that money. Now, the reason for that was to create job security and ensure that officers look forward to a pension and therefore get discouraged from engaging in malpractices that might end up in them being fired. Okay, so these two things were critical in reducing smuggling. Giving security of tenure to the officers and also standardizing the prices, the taxes on second-hand motor vehicles.
Broadening of tax. People do give a comparison in Tanzania, where I think these small taxes have been allocated to your PIN number or your mobile number, and the tax revenue just ballooned in Tanzania.
Yes.
Because it's just very difficult in an informal economy like ours to bring people on the tax base.
Yeah.
What did you do on tax base, and what should we do to widen the tax base? Because it's quite narrow.
Yeah. I don't know what has happened after I left, but I trust that the new Commissioner General continued with that process. We realized that getting into markets where most of these informal players are found, and also in compounds and so on, was going to be congesting the revenue collection agencies because councils were already there. And councils already had a database. So what we did was to have strategic alliance with councils throughout the country through the local government ministry, where councils signed up with us to work on a commission. As they collect their market levy, they also collect the 1%. You remember there was a 1% turnover tax on marketeers. I think it's still there, if it hasn't been abolished. So now the councils were to collect that money on a commission. Yeah. At the time I left, we had signed the memorandum of understanding. We were in discussions on the commission because there was disagreement. Because that commission, we had also market associations that wanted to benefit. The idea is the Zambia Revenue Authority Act does empower the Commissioner General to appoint a tax agent. So you can appoint a tax agent to collect tax on your behalf on a commission, as long as that. But at the time I left, we were agreeing on the modalities as well as the commission. That way you can broaden. But of course, if you remember, prior to that, we had started the tipping campaign. We were all over. I think we gave it almost 2 years to ensure that every citizen of a certain age opening a bank account had a tipping. And we successfully negotiated with the Bankers Association that they cannot open an account for anybody without having taxpayers' identification number. So we managed to grow the database. Now it's a question of now going into that database, identifying these people at the economic activities they're involved in, whether it's a taxable activity, whether it's a non-taxable activity, and if it's a taxable activity, what tax applies to them. So that's the process that I left at the time I jumped. If ZRA has continued with that project, I can guarantee you the widening of the tax base on the lines of Tanzania, Kenya as well did that, will be achieved or even better. Yeah.
When mineral royalty tax was made non-deductible, I think your tax revenue from the mining sector in 2019, 2020, and 2021 averaging $1 billion.
Yes.
And then the new government came in and abolished that mineral royalty. Not abolish, but make it deductible. Just speak to that. And why I want you to speak to that, also speak to the tax incentives that are given to the mining sector. Because we non-experts are challenged, tell us what non-tax incentives, what tax incentives has the minister given to the mining sector. So just speak to those two issues.
Okay, truthfully speaking, I do not believe that mining companies that were declaring losses for so long, so many years, were actually making losses. Logically speaking, I know mining is long-term, but if you continuously make a loss in a business for 5 consecutive years, would you survive? But these are companies that continued in business for 20 years, making losses, okay? We believed that they were not being truthful with their income tax returns. As I said, the only revenue, final revenue you get from the mining company is company income tax, and that time mineral royalty tax. Okay? These other taxes are neither here nor there. Pay as you earn, you can't count it as having been paid by a mining company. Okay, VAT, you can't count it. Okay, for the reasons that I explained earlier. So the focus in terms of government and indeed the people of Zambia benefiting from the mining sector is getting company income tax and mineral royalty tax. Okay? Now, ZRA pushed very hard to make mineral royalty tax non-deductible. Why? Because out of all these mining companies we had in Zambia, only one mining company was declaring company income tax. And it was not making sense. Not just a gut feeling or whatever, but even the reality, it was not making sense. You will not have a company that starts, first it's in the development stage, it starts producing, it's making losses until it closes because minerals have finished. Making losses. What type of a business is that? Okay? So we said we will reduce the mineral royalty tax and make it non-deductible in order to capture those that were declaring losses. At least let them contribute to the treasury. And that did wonders in terms of revenue collection. However, there were arguments from FQM that said, you are punishing us. Because we do declare our profits and we pay company income tax. So why are you taxing us mineral royalty tax and company income tax?
You're duplicating.
One of the proposals that ZRA made at the time to the government of the day then was, why don't we abolish company income tax and just remain with the mineral royalty tax at a certain percentage?
Higher percentage.
Yes, so that everyone pays. FQM let them not pay double taxes. They have an argument, quite all right. So let's abolish company income tax because I think we've tried, we've brought experts. We are not understanding how they are arriving at these figures. Even the 1 billion declared by this company, you know, when we send our officers, they said, no, it was correct. It was, but you could feel that there is some kind of not being truthful. Okay? Issues of transfer pricing, as you alluded to. Issues of inflating payments made to sister companies, supplying goods to that mining companies. Okay? Mining company. Issues of having contractors from a sister company offering contract services to a parent company with inflated payments. So we said all these things just tend to inflate the costs so that the profitability is reduced. And there are several other things that you can cite. So we said, let us abolish company income tax so that everyone pays mineral tax. Why? Because one, mineral tax is easy to tax. It's based on production. I don't need to understand your numbers and the gymnastics in your accounts. Okay? All I need is to deploy people to check your production and confirm your production. If I know your production, I'll know how to tax you because it's a percentage of production. So it's easy to manage. Number two, it's very difficult to cheat mineral royalty tax. Okay? That is the conversation we're having. It was not the conversation of deductibility and non-deductibility. That was not even negotiable. And mining companies knew that. That we were not going to negotiate that because that clearly gave benefits to the Zambian government in terms of additional revenue that they can invest in all other things, including sorting out our debt exposure. You see, if you are collecting money properly from these resources, you can, in fact, put money aside to service your debt. Okay?
Speak to the incentives. What are these incentives that the mining sector enjoys?
Of course, the first one was the removal of non-deductibility, okay, because that gave mining companies serious profits. Because the way it works is that when you compute your income tax, all the mineral royalty tax that you paid has to come out of there. So it's like VAT. You've paid, but you get it later. But in this case, you get it through deducting from so it becomes a business cost. Okay? The way you would put what you paid to your contractors, what you do, that's how you are going to put mineral royalty tax. So you tend it from being a tax beneficial to the government to a cost beneficial to the mining company. Then, of course, they do have a lot of their machinery, which comes in duty-free. Okay? Some of it is
These
VAT.
Capital allowances they claim.
Yes, VAT. Then I think there was also an increase in the capital allowances. Okay? And the number of years during which you can claim. There was also, of course, VAT always existed. All the previous governments had made VAT refundable, something that as a revenue authority we had challenges with. Yeah, because seriously speaking, what you report is your net revenue.
Yeah.
So even if I'm announcing collections of ZRA, just ask me a simple question to say, is this gross collection or net? Because I must remove what we pay to the mining companies.
Yeah.
And I feel that is a bit weird. I think we should not run our tax that way. Because through those refunds, we actually reduce the benefits to the economy.
Yeah.
Okay? And I'm not an advocate of excessive taxation. I'm very mindful of the balance between taxation and investment. Okay? But it must be equitable.
Yeah.
As much as your investor is benefiting, the government, the people also must benefit. That's my theory of tax policy.
Yeah. No, it must be fair, equitable, and everyone must pay their bit. Not the rich getting away with it and the poor shouldering the burden. Kinsley Chanda, thank you for this huge enlightenment you've done to our country and to our viewers. What are your last words?
I think my last words is that hope should not be lost. This is a very rich country. The resources in this country are, they're overwhelming, really. And if we just get our acts together, Zambia cannot be poor, and Zambia should never be poor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've never understood how a wealthy, rich country has poor people. Yeah.
That's my point. That's my point. And it comes back to management. Yeah. Okay? We just ensure that we get our right economic policies, we get our right tax policy, and we ensure that we have the right mechanisms to harness these resources. I talked about formation of authorities. That is key. I think any government that will take up that idea, they will see a big change in the management of these resources that we are sitting on, which can give us so much money.
Which we are not monetizing. So now what are you doing now?
I'm a farmer.
You become a farmer?
Yes.
We'll look for the yield.
I've always been a farmer, so I have a lot of time. Instead of waking up at 06 going to ZRA, I wake up at 06 to go into my field.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. We were hosting Kinsley Chanda, Dr. Kinsley Chanda. He was a consultant for COMESA, for SADC Trade Hub. He was also an investment promotion advisor to the ZE, as you learned. He also worked at the National Treasury in South Africa. He's an accomplished leader, strategic manager, and he was Commissioner General at the Zambia Revenue Authority. Until next time, until we have another guest, ciao and good day. Shalom, shalom.